I want to say a few words about a very special copy of the Old Testament. Um, the Jews in Alexandria in Egypt, long before the Council of Jamnia, even before the birth of Christ, they had their own ideas about what was important to read, what we should keep and what we shouldn't keep. These Jews recognized the Torah and the prophets and the writings, those three main sections that are basically traditional in Jewish Bible and in the Protestant canon. But they also had seven additional books and some additions to books, some additions to Daniel, some additions to Esther. Those additions to Esther, as you might expect, had a lot of mention of God to make up for the fact that the rest of Esther doesn't. These additional books and the parts of books came to be known as the Apocrypha, or within Catholic tradition, they are known as the Deuterocanonicals, secondly canonicals. That canon, this list of books that includes Genesis to Malachi, and then also these additional books, this is the canon that forms the basis of the Septuagint. Now, the Septuagint, or it's sometimes represented with Roman numerals LXX, which is the number, 70, I think I heard it. See, Roman numerals, they're not just for Super Bowls anymore. That's right, you now have them, a reason for them in Introduction to Old Testament. The Septuagint is the translation of the Alexandrian canon into Greek. So not just Genesis to Malachi, but also these additional books into Greek. Now I'm going to make a pretty bold statement. I want you to stay with me on this. This is the most important Bible translation in history, particularly for the church. The most important Bible translation ever is the Septuagint, because the Septuagint was the Bible of the early Christian church, particularly outside of Palestine. So outside of Israel, those early Christian missionaries, remember, thanks to Alexander the Great, Greek has now become the language of the world and the language of the Roman Empire. And when these Christian missionaries are going out and they want to talk about Jesus as the Jewish Messiah and they want to show this from Scripture, they need a Scripture that's translated into Greek, and lo and behold, they've got one. So this is the most important Bible translation ever. And I say that I'm dead serious when I say that. It really, really is that important. Now, there was a story that was associated with it. And that story, that myth, that legend, and I want to keep saying it like this so that you hear that it's not fact. I very often get back on test that this is history. This is not history. This is a fable. This is a legend. Okay, all right. The story goes that according to legend, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, the king of Egypt, wanted a translation of the Hebrew Bible for his great library in Alexandria. But of course, being a great Ptolemaic king, he wanted it in Greek. All the enlightened people of the world spoke Greek, he believed, and so we need to have a copy of this Bible in Greek. So tradition says that he commissioned 6 individuals from the 12 tribes. 6 times 12 gives us 72. I don't know if 2 people didn't get registered in time. I don't know if they didn't want I don't know. Who knows why 72 comes to be known as 70, but this is the tradition that gives it that Roman numeral 70. And the story goes, the legend goes, the fable goes, the myth goes, that these individuals go off with their copies of the Hebrew Bible, and they all make copies of them, and they all come back, and they look, and miracle of miracles from Genesis to Malachi, all the copies that everyone had matched up down to the last letter. Now, if you are fluent in another language, you know that 2 people would never translate the same page 100% exactly the same. Language doesn't work like that. Language isn't code breaking. And to believe that 72 people would translate something as complex and beautiful as the biblical text exactly the same, it strains credibility to it's asking someone to believe. And then I climbed to the top of Lindner Tower and I flew to the architecture building. It's that level of fantasy that believe that could happen. So why would this tradition come about? Why would you make up a story that is so clearly hard to believe? There's no way this could ever happen. Why would you tell this story? What's the point of this fable? Well, some of you have grown up in church. I've grown up in church. Would you say that religious folks and church folks are pretty flexible people, roll with the punches, just take things as they come? No. No, right? Typically, people in religious traditions tend to be very traditional, very hard line, and they have a hard time changing. Now imagine for a second that the Holy Book, which has been written in Hebrew and transmitted in Hebrew and kept alive in Hebrew, now someone says, you know what, I think I'm going to put it in Greek. Well, people are going to react against that. No way. No, of course not. God spoke Hebrew. Says that right there at the burning bush, Etyeh, Esher, Etyeh. He said it in Hebrew. He didn't say it in Greek. He spoke in Hebrew, but you can't read Hebrew. I don't care that I can't read Hebrew. God spoke Hebrew. Don't change things. And so this story, this fable, this legend very likely came about as a way of saying, look, we all know that could never happen unless God was behind it. God was in the translation of the Septuagint. God wanted you to accept this. So really it was done as PR. So the story about it coming together all at once. The truth of it is, reality, that the Septuagint probably comes together over centuries, and it does finally come together, and when it does, it becomes very, very important to that early Christian church for whom it was Bible. And in truth, it stayed part of the Christian Bible for the next 400 years. It was probably the main translation that was used until the Latin Vulgate came along. So important point, important translation, and I want to take a moment to give it its due.